They tell you about the benefits package, the pension plan, the hazard pay that could buy you a new life. They don't tell you about the silence that isn't silent, the screams that have no source, or the way the shadows in this place cling to you long after your shift is over. They call it a correctional facility, a place for the nation's most secure assets. That's a lie. This isn't a prison for people. It's a cage for mistakes. Mistakes of nature, of physics, of God himself. My name is Mark, and for the last 7 months, I've been a guard here. The job posting just said High Security Federal Custodian. I thought I knew what that meant. I was wrong. And now I'm writing this down because the things I've seen, they don't stay buried. They fester, and I think one of them is about to get out. My life before the Penumbra facility was aggressively, painfully normal. I worked a dead-end logistics job, moving boxes in a warehouse that was either freezing or boiling depending on the season. The highlight of my week was Thursday night pizza with my sister Chloe. It was our ritual, ever since we were kids. Then came the diagnosis, a rare degenerative neurological disorder, the kind of thing doctors speak about in hushed, somber tones. The treatments were experimental, astronomically expensive, and not covered by any insurance I could ever afford. So I watched the person I loved most in the world begin to fade, her bright spark dimming behind a haze of pain and confusion. Debt collectors became a third party in our phone calls. The eviction notice on our door felt less like a threat and more like a countdown to the end of everything. Desperation is a kind of cold, you know? It seeps into your bones and makes you willing to do things you'd never imagine. That's when I saw the ad, tucked away on a government job board, flagged for extreme vetting and remote deployment. The salary was a number I had to read 3 times to believe. It was more than just a lifeline. It was a cure. It was Chloe's future. I applied without a second thought, sending my application into a digital void. I didn't expect to hear back. A week later, a black, unmarked envelope appeared in my mailbox. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a time, a date, and an address for an anonymous office building downtown. The bottom of the page had a single typed instruction: "Come alone, tell no one." The interview was less of a conversation and more of a psychological dissection. The room was gray. The furniture was gray. The man across the desk from me wore a gray suit. He never told me his name. He asked questions that seemed to have no right answers. Have you ever experienced a sense of unreality? Do you believe there are things in this world that defy conventional explanation? If you saw something impossible, would you report it, or would you question your own mind? I answered as honestly as I could, my answers colored by the suffocating weight of my desperation. I must have said the right things, because 2 weeks later, another black envelope arrived. This one contained a contract, a non-disclosure agreement so thick it could stop a bullet, and a one-way bus ticket to a town in the middle of the Nevada desert I'd never heard of. The bus dropped me off at a rusty gas station under a sky the color of a fresh bruise. A black SUV with tinted windows was waiting. The driver didn't speak a word the entire 2-hour drive deeper into the desert, down roads that weren't on any map. The world outside the window dissolved into a blur of sand and rock, the sun beaten down with a merciless intensity. Eventually, the SUV descended into a long, sloping tunnel carved directly into the side of a massive, featureless mesa. The temperature dropped with every foot we descended. The air grew thin and sterile, recycled and tasting of metal. We passed through 3 separate blast doors, each thick enough to withstand a nuclear strike, before pulling into a cavernous subterranean parking garage lit by cold, humming fluorescent lights. The driver finally spoke, his voice a gravelly monotone. "Welcome to the Penumbra facility, Level 1. My training, if you could call it that, was conducted by a man named Miller. He was a lifer, a man whose face was a roadmap of exhaustion and whose eyes held a permanent haunted look. He moved with the slow, deliberate gait of someone who had learned that sudden movements were a bad idea. He didn't teach me how to handle riots or break up fights. He taught me the rules. "This ain't your state pen, kid," he said on my first day, his voice a low rumble that was barely audible over the facility's ever-present low-frequency hum. We were standing in the guard's ready room, a sterile white space that smelled of ozone and industrial cleaner. The things in here, they ain't criminals, they're anomalies, inconsistencies. We don't rehabilitate, we contain. You forget that, you end up a statistic. You understand? I nodded, my throat too dry to speak. "Good," he grunted, handing me a heavy metallic gray uniform. "Now listen up, because I'm only gonna say this once. These are the rules. Not the ones in the book they gave you. These are the real ones, the ones that'll keep you alive." He held up one thick finger. "Rule number 1, you do your rounds. Every hour, on the hour. You never run, and you never, ever turn your back on a cell door for more than 3 seconds, even the empty ones, especially the empty ones." He held up a second finger. "Rule number 2, we have 4 wings, A, B, C, and D. They call them containment blocks. In Block A, you might hear things, familiar voices, mom, your old college buddy, your first girlfriend. It ain't them. It's the block. It learns you. Whatever you do, you don't answer. You don't even flinch. Give it nothing." A third finger joined the first 2. "Rule number 3, Block B is the quiet one. Too quiet. You'll see things out of the corner of your eye, a flicker of movement, a shadow that's the wrong shape. Don't look directly at it. Your peripheral vision is your best friend in there. You stare it down, it knows you've seen it. You don't want that." His fourth finger was crooked, as if it had been broken and healed badly. "Rule number 4, Block C. This one's important, kid. The cells in C are fitted with what they call perceptual filters. You won't see what's inside. You'll just see a kind of static, like a dead TV channel. Your job is to make sure that static is working. Sometimes it flickers. If you're on your rounds and a filter goes down, you don't try to be a hero. You don't peek. You hit the red button on your belt, you turn around, you walk at a steady pace back to the nearest checkpoint, and you don't look back, no matter what you hear. Screaming, begging, something that sounds like a goddamn parade. You don't look back." He paused, and for the first time I saw a flicker of something that looked like genuine fear in his eyes. He lowered his hand and leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "And rule number 5, the most important one. Down at the end of Block D, there's a final cell, Cell 001. There's only one resident in D Block. The manifest calls him the archivist. We just call him the old man. Your rounds will take you past his cell. The door is solid steel, no window, no slot. But he'll know you're there. He might talk to you. He has a voice like your favorite teacher or your grandfather. Calming, reasonable. He'll ask you for things. A book, a glass of water, a piece of paper. Kid, I don't care if he offers you the winning lottery numbers and the cure for cancer. You say nothing. You do nothing. You acknowledge him in no way whatsoever. You just keep walking. Is that clear?" I swallowed hard, the metallic taste in my mouth more pronounced. "Yeah, clear." "Good," Miller said, stepping back. "Your life depends on it. Not just your life in here, your whole life." The facility was a masterpiece of brutalist architecture and psychological oppression. Everything was concrete, steel, and fluorescent light. There were no windows, no clocks on the walls, no way to gauge the passage of time other than the mandated hourly patrols. The air was always the same temperature, the light was always the same sterile white. It was an environment designed to strip you of your senses, to make you feel like you were floating in a timeless, featureless void. The only sound was the omnipresent hum, a low thrumming that vibrated deep in your chest, and the soft, rubbery squeak of your own boots on the polished concrete floors. The wings were arranged in a cross shape, radiating out from a central panopticon-style guard tower where the senior staff monitored everything on a bank of screens. But the real work, the real containment, happened on the floor, on the patrols. My first few shifts were a blur of terror and adrenaline. I walked the corridors of Block A, my heart pounding in my chest, every nerve ending screaming. I heard it, just like Miller said I would, a whisper that sounded exactly like Chloe, saying my name. "Mark, are you there?" It was so real, so clear, that my head snapped towards the sound before I could stop myself. The cell it came from was empty, a featureless concrete box. I felt a cold dread wash over me as I remembered Miller's warning. It learns you. I clenched my jaw, forced myself to look forward, and kept walking, the sound of my own ragged breathing loud in my ears. Block B was worse, in a way. The silence in that wing was absolute, profound. It felt like a physical presence pressing in on you, muffling the sound of your own footsteps. And the shadows, they played tricks on you. I'd see a flicker of movement just at the edge of my vision, a shape darting from one cell door to another. When I turned my head, there was nothing there. Just long, empty corridors of steel and concrete. But I could feel it. A sense of being watched by 100 unseen eyes. It was a place that made you doubt your own sanity, that made you feel like the walls themselves were alive and breathing. I dreaded my patrols in Block C the most. The perceptual filters on the cell doors were deeply unsettling. It was like looking at a slice of pure digital noise, a roiling, churning field of black and white static that buzzed with a low, almost subliminal energy. My job was simple. Walk the length of the corridor, make sure all the filters were stable, and get out. On my third shift, I saw one of them flicker. For less than a second, the static vanished. I didn't see what was inside, not really, just a flash of something. A shape that was wrong. Too many joints, a texture like wet leather, and a color I'd never seen before. A shade of purple that made my stomach clench. The image was burned into my brain for a fraction of a second before the static snapped back into place. My hand flew to the red button on my belt. I could hear something from inside the cell. A wet, sloppy sound, like a large animal chewing on something gristly. I turned and walked, my legs feeling like lead, forcing myself not to run, just as Miller had taught me. Behind me, I heard a voice, high and childlike, begin to sing a nursery rhyme. I didn't look back. The money started appearing in Chloe's medical fund, just as the contract promised. Huge, anonymous deposits. Her doctors were amazed. They could start the new treatments, the ones with a real chance of working. Chloe called me, her voice stronger than it had been in months, full of a hope I thought was long dead. She asked me what I was doing, where I was. I lied. I told her I was on an oil rig in Alaska, that the connection was bad. The lie tasted like ash in my mouth, but it was a necessary one. Her hope was being paid for by my fear. It felt like a fair trade. I fell into a routine, a grim rhythm of patrol, sleep, repeat. I learned to live with the constant low-level dread. I learned to ignore the whispers of my dead mother in Block A, to not flinch at the skittering things in the corners of my eyes in Block B. I learned to walk the length of Block C with my gaze fixed on the floor in front of me, my thumb hovering over the panic button. And every shift, I walked past cell 001. The end of D Block was different from the rest of the facility. The air was colder, the hum was deeper, and the silence felt heavier, more ancient. Cell 01 had no filter, no window, just a monolithic slab of what looked like polished obsidian set into the concrete wall. There was no sound from within, no sign of life. But I always knew when I was getting close. The hairs on my arms would stand up. A pressure would build behind my eyes. It felt like walking towards a massive, invisible weight. For the first few weeks, there was nothing, just the oppressive silence. Then, one night, as I passed the door, a voice spoke. It was calm, gentle, and achingly familiar. "Good evening, Mark." I froze mid-stride.
It wasn't a voice I recognized, but it felt like one I should. It was the kind of voice you trust instinctively. Miller's words screamed in my head, "You say nothing, you do nothing." I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms, and forced myself to take another step. "It's a lonely walk, isn't it?" the voice continued, its tone conversational, friendly. "It must be difficult to keep your thoughts straight." I kept walking, my heart hammering against my ribs. Each step was a monumental effort of will. "I know about Chloe," the voice said, and this time I did stop. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Her T-cell count is responding well to the interleukin therapy, but the mitochondrial degradation is accelerating. The doctors are puzzled. They're treating the symptoms, not the cause. My blood ran cold. How? How could he know that? The specifics of Chloe's condition were known only to her specialist and to me. It wasn't in any public record.
"I can help her," the voice said softly. "The cause of her condition is a misfolded protein, a simple informational error. It's a sequence that can be corrected. I know the sequence." I stood there, paralyzed, my back to the obsidian door. I could feel his words wrapping around me, warm and seductive. It was hope, a poison I had long since sworn off. "All I need," the old man whispered, his voice seeming to come from right behind me, "is a piece of paper and something to write with." Miller's face flashed in my mind, his eyes wide with fear. "I don't care if he offers you the cure for cancer." This was it, the test, the ultimate temptation. My hand trembled as I reached for the small notepad and pen in my breast pocket. My fingers brushed against the worn paper. It would be so easy. A simple, harmless act. A piece of paper for my sister's life. With a surge of adrenaline born of pure terror, I ripped my hand away from my pocket and stumbled forward, breaking into a clumsy, shuffling run. I didn't stop until I reached the checkpoint at the entrance to D Block, collapsing against the reinforced steel door, gasping for air. The guard on duty just gave me a knowing look and slid a paper cup of water through the slot. He didn't ask any questions. He didn't have to. I told Miller what happened. I found him in the mess hall, staring into a cup of black coffee as if it held the answers to the universe. I recounted the whole conversation, my voice shaking. He listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he was silent for a long time. "He's getting bolder," Miller finally said, his voice grim. "He's never been that specific before. He's learning things from outside." "How?" I asked, my own voice a hoarse whisper. "There's no internet down here, no contact with the outside world." Miller took a long sip of his coffee. "This place, kid, it's a closed system, but it leaks. Information, reality, whatever you want to call it, it seeps in and out. The old man, he's like a taproot. He can draw things from places we can't even imagine. He reads the facility. He reads the people in it. He read you, your fears, your hopes, and he used it." "He said he could cure her," I said, the words feeling foolish as I spoke them aloud. "And maybe he could," Miller conceded, fixing me with a hard stare. "But at what cost? You think a being like that does anything for free? You give him a piece of paper, you're giving him a page of reality to rewrite. You give him a pen, you're giving him the tool to do it. You don't make bargains with the devil, kid, and you sure as hell don't make them with whatever is in that cell." That night, the nightmare started. Not the usual anxiety dreams about showing up to work naked or forgetting a locker combination. These were different. I dreamed I was walking down the corridors of the Penumbra facility.
but the walls were made of shifting flesh, and the hum was a chorus of pained, guttural moans. I dreamed of cell 001's door swinging open, revealing not an old man, but a void that stared back at me, a darkness that knew my name. I would wake up drenched in sweat, my own scream caught in my throat, the silence of my small concrete dorm room more terrifying than any noise. The incident with the old man changed something in me. The fear was still there, a constant companion, but now it was mingled with a new, dangerous emotion: curiosity. Who were these things? Where did they come from? And what was the true purpose of this place? The official line was containment of anomalous artifacts and entities for national security. That sounded sterile, bureaucratic. It didn't account for the feeling of raw, ancient malevolence that radiated from D Block, or the palpable sorrow that clung to the air in Block A.
I started paying closer attention, observing things I had previously forced myself to ignore. In Block A, I noticed that the voices weren't just random. They followed patterns. They would mimic the loved ones of whichever guard was on patrol, cycling through them. It was as if the wing itself was a vast, empathetic parasite, feeding on our emotional attachments. One night, I heard a new guard, a young kid named Simmons, gasp and stumble. I heard the whisper that followed him down the hall, the voice of a young woman crying, begging him not to leave her. The next day, Simmons put in for a transfer. He was gone by the end of the week. The block had tasted his grief and found it to its liking. In Block B, the shadows became more distinct. I learned not to look, but to sense. They moved with a purpose that was terrifying. I was charting the patrol routes on a small map in my downtime, and I noticed something chilling. The shadows in B Block always moved in the opposite direction of the guards' patrols, like predators circling a herd, always staying just out of sight, always aware. They weren't random flickers, they were hunting. Or worse, they were observing, studying us. The work was grinding me down. The lack of natural light, the recycled air, the constant drain and tension. It was taking a toll. I lost weight. Dark circles formed under my eyes. I started talking to myself on patrols just to break the oppressive silence. Miller noticed. "You're getting 1,000-yard stare, kid," he said one day as we sat in the mess hall. "I can't sleep," I admitted. "The dreams." "I know," he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "We all get 'em. It's the price of admission. The place, it gets into your head. It's like a background radiation. You can't see it, but it's changing you on a cellular level." He took a worn, tarnished coin from his pocket and flipped it onto the table between us. It was an old silver dollar. "My father gave me this. He said, if you ever lost, use this to find your way home. I hold on to it when I'm on patrol. Reminds me that there's a world outside these concrete walls, that I'm still me." He pushed it across the table. "You need it more than I do." I looked at the coin, then back at him. "Miller, don't say anything," he said, standing up. "Just hang on to it. Find your own anchor, kid, or this place'll wash you away." I started carrying the coin on my patrols. The cool, solid weight of it in my pocket was a comfort, a small, tangible piece of a sane world. When the whispers in Block A got too loud, I'd wrap my fingers around it. When the shadows in Block B felt too close, I'd trace the outline of the eagle on its back. It helped. It wasn't no magic charm, but it was an anchor, just as he'd said. A month after the incident with the old man, we had a containment breach. It was in Block C. I wasn't on duty in that wing, but the entire facility went into lockdown. Alarms blared, red lights flashed, and heavy steel doors slammed shut, sealing off each section. I was trapped in the B Block corridor with 2 other guards. We could hear the chaos over the comms, shouting, screaming, the sound of something heavy hitting metal, and another sound, a high-pitched, chittering shriek that didn't sound like it could come from any living creature.
Then, silence. The alarm stopped. The emergency light switched off, plunging us back into the standard sterile white. A voice came over the comms, cold and emotionless. It was Director Thorne, the facility's warden, a man who looked more like an accountant than a prison boss. Containment breach in C7 neutralized. All personnel stand down and resume standard duties. That was it. No explanation, no details. Later I heard the whispers. A rookie guard had panicked. A filter had flickered, and instead of hitting the alarm and walking away, he had stared. He had looked for a full 3 seconds. The official report said he had suffered a catastrophic psychotic episode and was transferred to a long-term medical facility. Miller told me the truth. "They brought him out in a body bag, kid," he said, his voice low and tight. "Or what was left of him. The thing in C7, they call it the Weaver. It doesn't just kill you. It unmakes you, takes you apart, thread by thread. They found pieces of him woven into the walls of the cell. The image that conjured made me physically sick. And the filter? What happened? The thing did something to it. It overloaded the psychic buffer. The rookie looking at it just gave it the juice it needed," Miller explained. "They got it back online, but it was close. Too close."
The incident left a pall over the entire facility. The already crushing tension was now dialed up to an unbearable level. Guards walked their patrols with a new kind of fear in their eyes, a fear born not of the unknown, but of the known. We had seen a glimpse of what happened when the rules were broken, when the containment failed. It was during this time that I started to notice patterns in the old man's behavior. He was quiet for a while after the breach, but then he started talking to me again on my patrols. He never mentioned Chloe again. Instead, he talked about the prison itself. He seemed to know everything. He knew about the Weaver in C7. He knew about the empathetic parasite in Block A. He called them by names I'd never heard, ancient, guttural sounds that seemed to catch in the air. He spoke of the facility not as a prison, but as a library, and of its inmates as books of forgotten knowledge. "They are stories, Mark," he would say, his calm voice a terrifying counterpoint to the things he described. "Each one a reality that branched off from your own and withered. You are not their jailer. You are their terrified, ignorant librarian." I never answered him, but I listened. I couldn't help it. His words were weaving a narrative, a secret history of the universe that was both terrifying and addictively compelling. He told me about the beings in Block B, the silent observers, who were a kind of cosmic jury, endlessly watching, endlessly judging. He said they weren't prisoners at all. They were here by choice. "They are waiting for something," the old man whispered one night, his voice filled with a strange, almost gleeful excitement. "A sign, a catalyst, a door to be opened." I held on to Miller's coin, the metal digging into my palm, but the old man's words were seeping into my mind, planting seeds of doubt and dread. What was this place? What were we really containing? Were we the guards, or were we just a different class of prisoner, trapped in a cage we didn't understand? The pressure was getting to Miller, too. He was always a quiet man, but he became nearly silent. He drank more coffee, his hands developed a slight tremor, and he started talking about retirement, about a cabin in Montana he wanted to buy. It was a pipe dream, and we both knew it. No one just retired from the Penumbra facility. One evening, I found him in a small, forgotten storage room, staring at an old, faded photograph. It was a picture of him and a woman, both of them young and smiling, standing in front of a small suburban house. "My wife," he said without looking at me. "She died a few years before I came here. Car accident." "I'm sorry," I said, the words feeling inadequate. "The whispers in Block A, sometimes it uses her voice," he confessed, his own voice thick with an emotion I'd never heard from him before. "Tells me she's waiting for me, that she's cold. It knows how to twist the knife." He folded the picture carefully and put it back in his wallet. "This place feeds on us, kid, on our memories, our pain. It's not just concrete and steel. It's alive, and it's hungry."
That conversation haunted me. I saw the truth of it everywhere. The facility wasn't just containing these entities, it was using us, the guards, as a kind of fuel source. Our fear, our grief, our hope, it was all part of the system, a psychic buffer that helped keep the walls from crumbling. A week later, something happened that broke the grim routine and sent the facility spiraling into chaos. It started in Block B. A guard named Henderson, a big, stoic guy who had been here for 5 years, was on patrol. We heard him scream over the comms. It wasn't a scream of pain, but of pure, unadulterated terror. Then, nothing. When the response team got to him, he was standing in the middle of the corridor, unharmed, but staring blankly at a cell door. He was catatonic. He wouldn't respond, wouldn't move. His eyes were wide open, fixed on something none of the rest of us could see. They dragged him to the infirmary. Miller and I were tasked with reviewing his body cam footage to try and figure out what happened. The footage was chilling. It showed Henderson walking his normal patrol route through the silent, empty hallways of Block B. Everything was normal. Then he stopped. He tilted his head, as if listening to something. There was no sound on the recording. He then turned his gaze toward cell B12. The footage zoomed in slightly. There was nothing there, just a standard solid steel door. Henderson stood there for a full minute, and then he began to whisper, "I see it. It's beautiful." A few seconds later, he let out that horrifying scream, and the camera feed cut out.
Director Thorne classified the incident as another psychotic episode, but no one believed it. Henderson had broken a cardinal rule of Block B. He had stared. He had looked directly at whatever it was that lurked just at the edge of sight, and it had broken his mind. But the most disturbing part was what the old man said to me on my next patrol. "The observers have passed their judgment on Mr. Henderson," he said, his voice as calm as ever. He saw the pattern, the architecture of things to come. It was too much for his simple mind. What pattern? I thought, my hand gripping the coin in my pocket. I didn't say it out loud, but I knew, somehow, that he had heard me. "The lock is breaking, Mark," the old man whispered. "The tumblers are falling into place. A key is turning, and soon the door will swing wide open." The Henderson incident was a catalyst. The atmosphere in the facility, already toxic, became venomous. Guards started quitting, taking the NDA payout and a lifetime of nightmares with them. The ones who stayed became jumpy, irritable. Fights broke out in the mess hall. The strict discipline that held the place together was beginning to fray. We all felt it, a sense of impending doom. The old man's words echoed in my head. A key is turning. Miller was taking it the hardest. He became a ghost, haunting the corridors with a vacant look in his eyes. He stopped talking about his cabin in Montana. He just did his job, a silent, grim automaton. I tried to talk to him, to reach him, but it was like he was behind a wall of glass. Then came the night that shattered everything. It was a double shift. The facility was short-staffed due to the recent wave of resignations. I was exhausted, running on fumes and caffeine. The hum of the prison seemed louder, more insistent, drilling into my skull. I was on patrol in Block A when it happened. The whispers were bad that night, frantic, overlapping. They were using Chloe's voice again, but it was distorted, full of static and pain. I was gripping Miller's coin so hard my knuckles were white, just trying to get through the patrol. As I passed cell A9, I heard a different voice. It was Miller's wife. "Frank?" the voice whispered, full of love and longing. "Frank, is that you? I've missed you so much." I froze. Miller was on patrol in the adjoining corridor. He would be passing the other side of this cell block in a few seconds. "Frank, I'm so cold," the voice sobbed. "Why did you leave me? Come back to me. Just open the door. I'm right here." A cold, sickening dread washed over me. I broke protocol. I keyed my comm. "Miller? Frank, do you copy?"
There was no response. "Miller, talk to me," I shouted into the calm, my voice echoing in the empty hall. Static. I started to run, my boots pounding on the concrete. I flew down the corridor, around the corner, and into the wing where Miller was supposed to be. The hallway was empty, but at the far end, the door to the maintenance corridor stood slightly ajar, a place we were never supposed to enter during patrol. My heart was a cold lump of ice in my chest. I drew my service weapon, a heavy-duty tranquilizer pistol we carried but had never once used, and pushed the door open. The corridor was dark, lit only by a single flickering emergency light. And at the far end of it, I saw him. Miller was standing in front of the access panel for cell A9. He was typing in a code, his hands moving with a strange, dreamlike slowness. The voice of his wife was coming from the cell speaker system now, a sweet, poisonous lullaby. "That's it, my love. Just one more number. Let me out. We can be together again." "Miller, no!" I screamed, my voice cracking. He didn't seem to hear me. He pressed the final button. There was a loud hiss of pneumatics, a heavy clank of locking bolts retracting. The heavy steel door to cell A9 began to slide open. I didn't see what came out. I just saw the light from the corridor get swallowed by a patch of darkness that wasn't a shadow. It was a hole in the world, a void that moved with a horrifying speed. I saw Miller turn towards it, a look of ecstatic joy on his face as the darkness engulfed him. He didn't scream. He just dissolved. One moment he was there, the next he was gone. And the voice of his wife let out a triumphant, inhuman shriek that shattered the emergency light and plunged the corridor into absolute blackness.
I was alone in the dark with it. I couldn't see anything. I could only hear it. A sound like wet fabric tearing and a soft, sibilant whisper that was now using Miller's voice. "It's okay, kid. It doesn't hurt. Let me show you." I fired the tranquilizer pistol blindly into the darkness, the dart hissing through the air. I heard a wet impact, followed by a sound of surprise, a sharp intake of breath. The whispering stopped. I didn't wait to see what happened. I scrambled backward, crab-walking over the cold concrete, my breath coming in ragged, terrified sobs. I found the doorway, stumbled out into the main corridor, and slammed the heavy maintenance door shut just as I heard something slam against it from the other side, the impact shaking the entire wall. I hit every alarm I could find. The lockdown procedure initiated, steel doors slamming shut all around me. I collapsed onto the floor, shaking uncontrollably, the image of Miller dissolving into nothingness burned permanently onto the backs of my eyelids. The official story was that guard Frank Miller, suffering from extreme psychological distress, had committed suicide by deliberately causing a containment breach. I was the one who found him, who secured the breach. They called me a hero. They gave me a commendation and a bonus. They told me to take a few days off to see the on-site psychologist. I knew it was a test. If I showed too much trauma, if I disputed the official story, I'd end up in a long-term medical facility, just like the rookie from Block C. So I played the part. I nodded, I accepted their condolences, I said all the right things. But I knew the truth. Miller hadn't killed himself. He'd been seduced. He'd been murdered by a ghost in the machine, a sorrow-eating entity that we had kept fed with our own pain for years. And I was the only one left who knew it. The coin he gave me felt heavy in my pocket. It wasn't an anchor anymore. It was a weight, a reminder. The facility felt different after Miller's death. The hole he left was more than just a missing person. It was a crack in the foundation of our grim little world. The thing from A9 had been contained again, but for a few terrifying minutes, it had been free. The genie had been out of the bottle. We all knew it was only a matter of time before another one got out. And in the background, from the cold, silent end of D-Black, I could almost feel the old man smiling.
The nightmares got worse. Now Miller was in them. He would stand in the fleshy corridors of my dreams, his face a mask of serene emptiness, and he would whisper the things the old man had told me. "It's a library, Mark. All the forbidden stories are here. Don't you want to read the last chapter?" My grief and fear were a toxic cocktail. I barely ate, I barely slept. The only thing keeping me going was the thought of Chloe. Her treatments were working. The money I was earning here, the price of my soul, was buying her a second chance at life. That was the only thing that mattered. Director Thorne called me into his office a week after the incident. His office was the only room in the facility that had any personality, and that personality was one of cold, sterile control. The walls were lined with books that looked like they had never been opened. "Mark," he said, gesturing for me to sit. He didn't use my last name. He had never been that personal before. "You've been through a traumatic experience, but you've handled it with exemplary composure. You have proven your loyalty to the program."
I just nodded, my hands clenched in my lap. Frank Miller was a good soldier, but he was compromised, Thorne continued, his voice devoid of any emotion. He allowed his personal attachments to become a security risk. That is a mistake we cannot afford. He steepled his fingers and looked at me, his eyes like chips of ice. "We've been watching you, Mark. You have a strong motivator, your sister. That gives you focus, but it is also a potential vulnerability. The entity in D001 has already attempted to leverage it against you." My blood ran cold. Of course they knew. They knew everything. "We're promoting you," Thorne said, his words catching me completely off guard. "Senior custodian. It comes with a significant pay increase. It also comes with new responsibilities, new clearances. We believe you have the resilience to handle more sensitive assignments." I didn't know what to say. It wasn't a request. It was an order. "Your first new assignment," he said, sliding a thin black file across the polished desk towards me, "is to begin a dialogue." I stared at the file. The words stamped on the front were simple, stark. Subject, D-01, the archivist. My breath caught in my throat. "You want me to talk to him?" "He has taken an interest in you," Thorne said, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "He is an unprecedented source of intelligence. He has been uncooperative with our previous interviewers. We believe he will be more forthcoming with you. You will be provided with a list of approved questions. You will log every word of your conversations. You will not deviate from the script. Is that understood?" It was a death sentence, a command to walk into the lion's den and try to engage it in polite conversation. Miller's warning, his final, desperate plea, echoed in my mind. You don't make bargains with the devil. But I had no choice. Refusing would mean the end of my career, the end of the money, the end of Chloe's hope. And worse, it would mark me as a liability. Liabilities in the Penumbra facility had a way of disappearing. "Understood, sir," I said, my voice a hollow echo of my own. As I picked up the file, I could almost hear the old man's voice, whispering from the end of that cold, dark corridor. "The key is turning, Mark. And you are the one who is going to slide it into the lock." My new duties began the next day. They took me off the standard patrol rotation. My entire shift was now dedicated to Cell 001. They gave me a small reinforced monitoring station set up 20 feet from the obsidian door. It was equipped with a high-fidelity microphone and the digital recorder. I had a chair, a small desk, and the black file containing the approved list of questions. The questions were dry, clinical. What is the nature of your origin? Describe the energy signature of anomaly C7. Explain the temporal distortion recorded in Sector Gamma. I sat there for the first 8 hours in silence. The pressure from the cell was immense, a physical weight on my chest. I just stared at the blank, polished surface of the door, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. I said nothing. The old man said nothing.
It was a battle of wills, a silent war across a 20-foot abyss. On the second day, I decided to begin. My throat was dry. I picked up the microphone, my hand slick with sweat. I keyed the button. Subject D-01, I began, my voice trembling as I read from the script. Can you describe the nature of your origin? Silence. The hum of the facility seemed to mock me. I waited for a full minute, then repeated the question. Still nothing. I spent the entire shift asking the same question over and over, my voice growing hoarse, my words swallowed by the oppressive silence. This went on for a week. I would arrive, sit at the desk, and read the first question from the file for 12 hours straight. No response. I was beginning to think this was some kind of elaborate psychological test, designed to see when I would break. The stress was unbearable. I felt like a man shouting into a hurricane.
Then, on the 8th day, he answered. I had just asked the question for what must have been the 1,000th time. Origin? The old man's voice filled the small station, as calm and reasonable as ever, making me jump in my seat. You want to know where I am from? That is a very complex question mark. It is like asking a river where it is from. Is it from the spring, the rain, the ocean it is flowing towards? Origin is a matter of perspective. I was so stunned he had spoken that I almost forgot what to do. I fumbled with the file, my fingers shaking as I found the next approved question. Please elaborate on your temporal perspective. I could hear what sounded like a soft chuckle. The men who wrote those questions are like children trying to understand the sun by catching a single beam of light in a jar. They think of time as a straight line, a single solid thread. But it is not. It is a tapestry, Mark, woven from infinite threads of possibility. I am not from a thread. I am the loom. His words made no literal sense, but I felt a terrifying, intuitive understanding of what he meant. I dutifully recorded his answer, my hand cramping as I wrote. Our dialogue continued like this for weeks. I would ask the sterile, approved questions, and he would respond with cryptic, poetic answers that hinted at a cosmic scale of reality that my mind could barely comprehend. He never gave a straight answer, but he gave me knowledge. He explained the entity in A9, the grief eater, as a creature that existed in the emotional spectrum, drawn to sorrow as a moth to a flame. He described the weaver in C7 as a being from a reality with different physical laws, a place where life was not based on carbon, but on geometry and mathematics. He was giving Thorne and the researchers exactly what they wanted, data. But I knew he was also giving me something else. He was recalibrating my mind, stretching my understanding of the possible, preparing me for something. He often spoke of me and my purpose. "You are a strange anchor, Mark," he said one day. "You are so thoroughly grounded in your simple, powerful emotions. Your love for your sister, it is like a lighthouse in a sea of cosmic chaos. It gives you a weight, a reality, that fascinates the other residents. It is why the grief eater called to Frank Miller through you. It is why the observers watch you so intently." "I'm nothing special," I said, speaking without thinking, deviating from the script for the first time. "Oh, but you are," the old man replied, his voice soft. "You are a focal point, a fulcrum, and a fulcrum can be used to move the world." My conversations with the old man became the terrifying center of my existence. I would spend my shifts with him, my mind reeling from the concepts he described. And then I would go back to my dorm and collapse into dreams filled with impossible geometry and whispering darkness. The line between the prison and my own mind was beginning to blur. I knew I was being played. I knew this was a trap. But the information was addictive. I found myself looking forward to my shifts, to the next piece of the universal puzzle he would reveal.
I was becoming the very thing Miller had warned me against, a willing participant in the damnation of myself. One night, he changed his approach. I asked him a standard question about a dimensional rift in the facility's lowest levels. "I am weary of these questions, Mark," he said, a note of impatience in his voice. "They are parlor tricks. Let us speak of important things. Let us speak of Chloe." My heart stopped. "That topic is not authorized." "Do not hide behind their rules," he chided gently. "The new treatment is failing. The protein degradation has found a new pathway. The doctors are going to tell you next week that her time is running out."
A wave of nausea and terror washed over me. "You're lying." "Am I?" he asked. "Check your encrypted messages from the hospital administrator. Check the latest blood panel results. They are hiding the truth from you, Mark, to ensure your continued compliance. They need you here. Her hope is their leverage, but the hope is a lie." My hands were shaking so badly I could barely operate the terminal in my station. I pulled up my secure connection to the hospital's patient portal. There was a new message, flagged as Physician Confidential. I opened it. It was a memo from Chloe's lead doctor to the hospital board. It said exactly what the old man had claimed. The experimental therapy had failed. Her condition was terminal. They were estimating she had 6 months left, at most. The world dissolved into a meaningless roar in my ears. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. All of it. The fear, the sleepless nights, the ghost of Miller, my own shredded sanity. It had all been for nothing. I had traded my soul, and the price hadn't been enough. I started to sob, deep, ragged gasps of pure despair, right there in my chair, 20 feet from the monster in the obsidian cell. "I told you." The old man's voice was gentle, full of a terrible, seductive pity. "The men you work for do not care about her. They do not care about you. You are a tool, a key. But I care, Mark." "What do you want?" I choked out, the words torn from my throat. "I want what you want. A better world. A world where little girls don't wither and die because of a simple error in the cosmic code. I can fix her, Mark, not just the symptoms. I can rewrite the code. I can make it so she was never sick at all." "How?" I whispered. "I have already told you. I am the loom. I can reweave the thread of her life. But my hands are bound. My power is contained within this room, dampened by this facility. I need a conduit. I need a way to touch the world outside, just for a moment." I knew what he was going to say before he said it. The air grew thick, heavy. "The facility is powered by a central energy core, a singularity they ripped from the heart of a dying star," the old man explained. "It is what keeps the filters online, the dimensional anchor stable. It is also a cage. But there is a flaw in the design, a manual override protocol, a single terminal located right here in D block that can create a momentary facility-wide power fluctuation, a reboot, if you will." My eyes darted to a corner of the block I had never paid much attention to. There was a small shielded terminal there, behind a stenciled sign that read, "Emergency Power Cycle, Directorate Level Access Only." For less than a second, the old man's voice whispered, full of promise, "The cage will flicker. The locks will loosen. In that second, I can reach out. I can find the thread that is Chloe, and I can mend it. It will be as if she was never ill." "They'll know," I said, my mind racing. "The system will reboot. They'll know I did it." "And what will they do, Mark? Fire you? Your sister will be healthy. You will be free of this place. A small price to pay for a miracle, don't you think?" It was the ultimate bargain. Chloe's life for my job. A life for a life. But I remembered what Miller had said, what he had died for.
You don't make bargains. What's the catch? I asked, my voice cold. There was a long pause. For the first time, the old man's voice lost some of its warmth, some of its calm reason. It was replaced by a chilling intensity. The catch, he said, is that some of the other doors might loosen as well. Some of the other stories might want to add a new chapter. There may be a brief period of chaos, but it will be worth it, Mark. A new world is waiting to be born from the ashes of this one. A brief period of chaos? I thought of the weaver unmaking the rookie guard. I thought of the grief eater dissolving Miller into a memory. I thought of Henderson, his mind shattered by a glimpse of an impossible pattern. I looked at the obsidian door, and for the first time, I understood. He didn't just want to save Chloe. That was the bait. He wanted to open the library. He wanted to let all the stories out. He wanted to turn the whole world into the Penumbra facility. My blood ran cold, but my despair was a fire that burned hotter. What was the world to me if Chloe wasn't in it? This broken, ugly world that had done nothing but hurt her, that had sentenced her to death for no reason. Maybe it deserved to be rewritten. Maybe it deserved to burn. I looked from the terminal to the note on my screen confirming Chloe's fate, to the cold, black, silent door of cell 001. The coin Miller had given me felt like a lump of ice in my pocket. I took it out and placed it on the desk, an anchor to a world that had already let me drown. I stood up from my chair, my legs steady, my decision made. I began the long walk towards the emergency terminal. 20 feet had never felt so far. Each step was a choice, a nail in the coffin of the world as I knew it. The hum of the facility seemed to hold its breath. The shadows in the corners seemed to deepen. The old man's voice was a triumphant whisper in my mind, no longer needing the microphone. Yes, Mark, the librarian. It is time. Turn the page.